Have you ever listened to a mix and thought, this just sounds unclear, like there's a blanket over the speakers? That, my friend, is the dreaded mud. It's the enemy of a great mix, sucking the life out of your music and leaving it sounding dull and lifeless. Muddiness is often found lurking in the lower mid-range frequencies, around 200 to 500 Hz, but it can rear its ugly head anywhere in the spectrum. It makes it hard to pick out individual instruments, dulls the impact of the drums, and leaves your vocals sounding like they're singing from inside a box. But fear not, just like a seasoned ghost hunter, we're going to shine a light on this audio phantom and banish it for good. We'll break down the most common causes of mud and equip you with the tools and techniques to defeat it. By the end of this essay, you'll be well on your way to crafting mixes that are clear, powerful, and full of life. So grab your headphones, fire up your DAW, and let's get mixing. One of the biggest culprits behind muddy mixes is frequency masking. This occurs when multiple instruments occupy the same frequency range, creating a sonic traffic jam. Imagine a rock band where the guitars, bass, keys, and vocals are all competing for space in the lower mid-range. The result? A muddy mess where nothing stands out. Think of it like this: each instrument needs its own space to breathe in the frequency spectrum. When instruments overlap too much, they start to mask each other, leading to a loss of clarity and definition. For example, if your bass guitar and kick drum are both booming away in the same low-frequency range, they'll end up fighting for attention, creating a muddy and undefined low end. Similarly, if your guitars and vocals are crowded in the same mid-range frequencies, it will be difficult to hear either clearly. To fix this, we need to create some sonic separation by giving each instrument its own space in the mix. We'll explore some practical techniques for achieving this in the coming sections. EQ, or equalization, is a powerful tool that can make or break your mix. Used correctly, it can sculpt your sound, add clarity, and create space. But use it haphazardly, and you might just end up adding more mud to the mix. One common mistake is boosting frequencies instead of cutting them. While it might seem counterintuitive, cutting unwanted frequencies is often more effective than boosting the ones you want to emphasize. Another common pitfall is not knowing which frequencies to target. Every instrument has its own unique frequency range, and boosting or cutting in the wrong areas can lead to a muddy, unbalanced sound. For instance, boosting the low mids on a vocal track might seem like a good way to add warmth, but it can also make the vocal sound boxy and muddy. Similarly, boosting the highs on a guitar track can add presence, but too much boost in the wrong frequencies can introduce harshness. The key is to use EQ strategically, identifying and attenuating the frequencies that are contributing to muddiness, rather than blindly boosting everything. In the next section, we'll look at some practical EQ techniques to clean up your mix. Sometimes the culprit behind a muddy mix isn't the processing, but the arrangement itself. Too many instruments, layers, and sonic elements competing for space can lead to a cluttered and undefined sound. Think of your mix like a painting. Just as too many brushstrokes can obscure the image, too many layers in a mix can muddy the waters and make it difficult to hear what's going on. This is especially true in genres like EDM and metal, where it's tempting to layer multiple synth parts or guitar tracks. However, even in sparser genres, having too many instruments occupying the same frequency range can lead to muddiness. The solution? Sometimes less is more. By streamlining your arrangement and removing unnecessary layers, you can create space for the most important elements to shine through. This might involve making tough decisions about which parts to keep and which to cut. Remember, it's better to have fewer elements that are clear and well-defined than a wall of sound that lacks impact. You could be making all the right moves in your mix, but if your listening environment isn't accurate, you might still end up with a muddy sound. Room acoustics play a crucial role in how we perceive sound. Untreated rooms can introduce unwanted reflections, standing waves, and resonances that color the frequency response of your monitors. This means you might be hearing too much or too little of certain frequencies, leading to poor mixing decisions. For example, if your room has a buildup of low frequencies, you might end up mixing the bass too low, resulting in a thin and weak sound on other systems. Similarly, the monitors you use can also impact your perception of the mix. If your monitors are not accurate or are not positioned correctly, you might be getting a skewed representation of the frequency balance. Addressing these issues might involve acoustic treatment, monitor calibration, or simply adjusting your listening position. By ensuring that your monitoring environment is as accurate as possible, you can make more informed mixing decisions and avoid muddiness. Reverb and other effects can add depth, space, and dimension to your mixes. But, too much of a good thing can quickly turn into a muddy mess. Excessive reverb, especially in the lower frequencies, is a surefire way to clutter up a mix. Long reverb tails can easily obscure the transients of instruments and vocals, making the mix sound washed out and honestly kind of undefined. Similarly, overusing effects like delay, chorus, and saturation can also contribute to muddiness if they are not used judiciously. These effects can thicken up the sound, but too much thickening can lead to a loss of clarity and definition. The key is to use effects sparingly and, strategically. When applying reverb, consider using a high-pass filter to roll off the low frequencies, which helps prevent them from muddying up the mix. Also, pay attention to the decay time of your reverbs and the mix levels of your effects. Just remember, effects should enhance your mix, not overpower it. The low end is the foundation of your mix, but it's also a common source of muddiness if not handled correctly. When bass frequencies aren't controlled, they can overpower the rest of the mix, leading to a boomy and undefined sound. One of the most important steps in taming the low end is to make sure your kick drum and bass are working together harmoniously. These two elements often occupy a similar frequency range, and if they're not in sync, they can create a muddy mess. This is where techniques like sidechain compression can be incredibly useful. By using the kick drum to trigger a compressor on the bass, you can create a pumping effect that allows both elements to occupy the same space without clashing. Additionally, using EQ to carve out space in the low end for each instrument is crucial. This might mean rolling off the low frequencies on instruments that don't need them, such as guitars and vocals. By carefully controlling the low end and ensuring that all elements are working together, you can create a solid foundation for a clear and powerful mix. Thankfully, we live in an age where technology is constantly evolving to help us achieve better sounding mixes. One of the most exciting developments in recent years has been the rise of AI-powered mixing tools. Plugins like Isotope Neutron and Sonable Smart EQ use machine learning algorithms to analyze your audio and suggest EQ, compression, and other processing settings to improve clarity and balance. These tools aren't meant to replace your ears or your mixing skills, but they can be incredibly helpful for identifying problem areas and providing a solid starting point for your mix. Another really useful tool for combating muddiness is a spectrum analyzer. This visual representation of the frequency content of your audio can help you identify areas of masking and make more informed EQ decisions. By embracing these technological advancements and incorporating them into your workflow, you can streamline your mixing process and achieve professional-sounding results. Congratulations! You've made it to the end of our mud-busting adventure. Armed with this newfound knowledge, you're well on your way to crafting mixes that are clear, powerful, and full of life. To recap, here's a handy checklist to ensure your mixes are as clear as a pristine mountain stream. Start with a clean slate. Use a high-pass filter on every track except your kick drum and bass guitar to remove unnecessary low frequencies. Sculpt with EQ. Use subtractive EQ to target and attenuate problematic frequencies that are causing muddiness. Simplify your arrangement. Don't be afraid to remove layers or instruments that are cluttering up the mix. Pan for space. Use panning to create stereo separation and give each instrument its own space in the mix. Control your effects. Use reverb and other effects sparingly, and always consider the frequency content of your effects. Master the low end. Make sure your kick and bass are working together harmoniously, and use EQ to carve out space for each element. Reference your mixes. Compare your mixes to professionally produced tracks to identify areas for improvement. And of course, trust your ears. Use your ears as the ultimate judge, and don't be afraid to experiment and find what sounds best to you. By following these steps and continuing to hone your mixing skills, you'll be well on your way to creating mixes that are clear, powerful, and truly shine.